So welcome. Thank you for coming out. My name is Doug Sondheim. I'm one of the trustees on the board. I'm the president this year. And you've got the board here. Just I'm going to need. And we've got Dr. Charlie Wilson, our interim superintendent, is here at the end as well. And then we've got Veronica Burns, Maureen Caraballo, and Joseph Martirano, who are architect, treasurer, and our director of buildings and grounds. So we'll all, as the night goes on, be able to answer a variety of different questions. So just to give you an idea of how the evening will go, I'll speak for about 2 or 3 minutes just to introduce the evening. Jeremy Arnon, one of our board members, will present some of the details of the bond and go through a PowerPoint. And Lauren Berman will talk a little bit about some specific parts of the Hillside edition as well. I think that'll probably take about 20, 25 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers, and that will be the remainder of the evening. So what I want to do is just give you a general overview of how the last 18 to 24 months, how we got to where we are right now, before we get into some of the details. The process of looking at the facilities started, well actually it's always ongoing, but one of the things that kicked off this current set of projects we're looking at was a 2015 building condition survey. And you guys ran that, right?
Yes,
Veronica, you did, okay. And so H2M, the architectural firm that we're using here for this project, ran that process. And coming out of that was a variety of different things that needed work. So that set of things was then taken about over the last 18 months or so to, some of those things were worked on at the time. They needed to be handled, and we handled those out of the operating budget. Some of those things were bigger, things like roof replacements, looking at the age of the boilers and things of that nature, and they needed to be put into a bond to be most financially feasibly handled. And so that set of things started to be discussed about 18 months ago. Additionally, some things around renovations. So some things that you might have seen if you've seen some of the materials are the middle school auditorium, the music suite at the high school, middle school, as well as space at Hillside, some of the space issues that were coming up. Those were introduced into conversations primarily with the Facilities Committee over the past 18 months. The Facilities Committee is made up of Joe and Maureen, our superintendent, as well as a couple board members, about 3 board members, and then there were some community members as well, who met every couple months in the beginning, and then recently a couple times a month to discuss a variety of proposals. So a lot of those conversations, the first set of things that came out about 18 months ago was about $35 million in potential projects. Obviously, what you're seeing in front of you now with the current proposal at 18 is about half of that. So a lot of the work that went into those conversations was, what do we prioritize? How do we handle some of these things? And some of the things maybe we don't handle. And that's what a lot of the conversations over the past 5 months have been. Probably by the end of the summer, the list that got to the full board was around $25 million in projects. And that's really where the board in late August started to discuss specifics about what would be included in this bond. And we have had a significant portion of all of our public board meetings since late August were discussing the bond. That was the kickoff conversation. We had it early, really in an attempt to try to get the public understanding what we're talking about and to better understand how we're thinking about and prioritizing some of these topics. The conversations over the last 5 months and some of the feedback we got from the public got it down to its current size of $18.3 million. So we removed a little over $6.5 million. One of the biggest reasons was people said it just feels too big. 25 million feels too big of a bond, and we want to make sure that we're doing something that nails the necessities, but doesn't go overboard with things that may or may not be necessary, or things that maybe are necessary but could be pushed off. And that was what a lot of the board's conversations surrounded. What do we feel is necessary? What do we feel is critically important now? And what do we feel could maybe be pushed off? So a couple of things that we think are important but aren't in this bond are, for example, the locker rooms at the high school. Those were probably a couple $1 million to repair. They haven't really been touched since the 1960s, and there are some pretty serious issues with them, but it didn't directly impact program and learning, and we thought, you know what, we can find another way in the coming years, doing it slowly in the operating budget or other ways to handle that. Another big project was, for example, the parking lot at Hillside. Several board members raised concerns. That's a nice to have, but it's not necessarily something we need, and I don't think it's a good use of money. We discussed that, and we pulled that off. There were some things where we left parts of it in. For example, the windows at Hillside haven't been replaced, I think, since also the 1960s. They're really not energy efficient at all. All the windows at Hillside were in the bond. Well, we pulled out maybe 2/3 of those from this, and we're going to put 1/3 in the bond. And then in the subsequent years, try to slowly replace the others in the operating budget. So we tried to really think through quite a bit. How can we get this to a place that is a compromise for what we feel we need and what the town will vote for and pass? That's how we got to 18.3 now. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy. He'll walk us through what's in that 18.3 and take it over to Lauren when she has some things to share on the Hillside.
Thanks a lot. And thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. This is the second of 2 information sessions, so I'm glad that you guys are here and trying to learn as much as you can. As Doug mentioned, my name is Jeremy Arnon. I've been on the facilities committee talking about the bond for about a year, been on the board since last summer. I just want to quickly frame the discussion tonight. Sorry. I just want to quickly frame the discussion tonight based on some feedback that I've heard across the district. For a little context, I've lived here for about 13 years. I have a 7th grader and a 3rd grader. I mention this just because sometimes when I meet people, they think I'm only a Hillside parent. They think I'm new to the district. Been here for a long time. Long time comparatively in Hastings. But you know, when I first got here, I met friends that now have kids in college, some kids that have graduated college. I also have friends that have kids in preschool. So you know, I've seen this sort of new generation of Hillside parents. And you know, frankly, I don't see a lot of difference between this pre-Hipsterbia and post-Hipsterbia Hastings. You know, I hear that a lot, and you know, all you really need to do is look at the cars and the train at the train station to really see, you know, it's still Subarus, Toyotas, Hondas. It's not Teslas, Mercedes, and Porsches. You know, I bring that up to just say that, you know, this is not a bond about a generation of parents who want, moving from Brooklyn, who want a private school. This is, there are real space issues at Hillside, and this is really a bond to address those. You know, I'll be honest, when I first heard that we were doing a bond, you know, probably like most of you, I said, it's not a good time, you know, who wants to spend, but really, it's never really a good time to do a bond. And the fact is that, you know, when I looked at the numbers and when I looked at the facts, I realized that, you know, we've really kind of failed to do, over the last 15, 20 years, we failed to protect our number 1 assets that are our schools. We've kicked the can down the road. Now there's not much road left. And so what we're asking you to do is the same. Look at our presentation, look at the facts, look at the figures, ask good questions, and then make up your mind. But please get educated first and make sure that you're looking at the facts. So appreciate you guys coming and starting that process. So to take a look at where we're at, on January 7th, we decided on what the final version of the bond would be. So the vote is on Thursday, February 28th, 2019, from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. at Cochran Gym. The bond is $18,383,614. The important thing is that 42.4% is eligible for state aid. Very important to consider that. Really, we're only borrowing about $11 million of this, and we'll talk about that state aid a little bit more. But if you try to figure out what does this mean to your wallet, for every $100,000 of home value, it comes out to about $54.91. For the average house that is assessed at $825,000, that comes out to about $453 per year. So you can do the math on your own home, but those are some of the facts in terms of what the bond is. So how do we get to this number? Well, let's take a look at some of the comparative historical investment of different communities. So we took a look at the last 20 years, the investment of Irvington, Ardsley, and Dobbs Ferry compared to Hastings. And as you can see, it's pretty stark in terms of the difference. We've spent $18 million. This does not include this bond that we're doing now. We spent $18 million over the last 20 years, really sitting on the sidelines while our neighbors have spent $65 million, $56 million, $52 million. If this were our house, we haven't really updated our kitchen. We haven't touched the bathrooms. We've really just fixed the plumbing. And when we thought about, our last bond was in 2013. It was $8 million. We only touched the fields. The last bond before that was in 2001. It was about $10 million. That really means we haven't done any major work on the inside of our schools for almost 20 years. We've really haven't invested at the same level as we really needed to. If you look at the debt service, we are at, this is a tough chart to see, but the top red arrow is Irvington, the second arrow is Ardsley, and the third arrow is Dobbs Ferry. We are this, let me use this. We are this box here. So our debt service is $693 over the past 20 years, or $693 per student. When this bond passes, if this bond passes, our debt service will be $1,266. So still puts us well below the rest of our neighboring our towns. And so, as you can see, there's we've really invested much less than many of our neighboring communities. So we took a look at what was needed, as Doug mentioned, and we looked at what is the problem we're trying to solve. The problem that we have here is that our schools are somewhat falling into disrepair from a lack of investment and our space constraints, which are starting to really hamper the environment for our students. The proposed work that we're looking to do has projects at Hillside, Farragut Middle School, and the high school. So really work across all of our schools. So let's take a look at what we're thinking about doing at Hillside. At Hillside, we're looking at replacing the roof. We start with the nuts and bolts, such as the windows, as Doug mentioned, flooring, as well as updating the safety of the public address system. Then we're also looking at a building addition. So this building addition would provide 12,500 feet of square feet of space with a net gain of 5 classrooms. It's 10,750 square feet of internal space. The additional space is needed to do really a couple things. One, there's a lack of space for music programming. 2, lack of space for special ed and student support services. 3, we need more space for specialist teachers in classes. And 4, future constraints that we anticipate based on space issues. So we looked at the space and we said, well, how do we get here? What is really the space constraint? And so we did some research on Hillside versus other local elementary schools. And over the past decade, the 5-year rolling average at Hillside enrollment has increased by approximately 50 students. It's at its current levels, not seen in 20 years. As you can see, at Hillside, current enrollment is currently 643 students. That's 114 square feet per student. If you look at Irvington or Dobbs Ferry or Ardsley, 153 square feet, 154 square feet. The fact is that space matters. Now, of course, teachers matter too. I've heard people say, well, maybe they're making too large an issue about space. It's not really an either or. It's both. Teachers and space matter. And if you ask any of the teachers at Hillside, they'll tell you that it's tight. And if you've been to Hillside, you know that it's tight. So what does the building addition offer us? Well, it starts with 4 classrooms. We have 4 classrooms, 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. It also includes a multi-use space that functions as an air-conditioned auditorium, full-service cafeteria with the capacity for 2 grade levels to eat at one time. That's important because it offers us some flexibility on space issues. And it also enables us to move the current library into the current cafeteria space and create a centralized learning hub. We can reimagine what learning can be at Hillside. This 21st Century Learning Commons is a space that will allow Hillside students to learn in an environment that we can, frankly, really all be proud of and will truly be what Hastings is all about. The important thing to note is that the Learning Hub is made possible by this building addition. We are actually, it's not part, the Learning Hub is not part of the bond. We've taken $100,000 for furniture in the bond, but what we are doing is utilizing Joe and his team to build out that learning space. But it's not possible without this flexible use of the building addition. So let me show you some pictures. Everyone loves pictures, and this is my favorite part. So these are some inspirational pictures. This is really sort of, not necessarily what it will exactly look like, but gives you a sense. So the ability to have solar panels on the roof for optimal energy efficiency, windows taking advantage of lots of natural sunlight on the south side of the building. New classrooms will be in the back. You can't really see them here, but 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top. And the current playground would remain exactly where it is. The climbing wall would no longer exist, but the rest of the playground would remain untouched. As you can see from another angle, nice landscaping to help soften the transition of the building with the hill. Great outdoor classroom feature that H2M has thought of, where each grade could have their own terrace section, potentially for growing a garden right here. And if you take a look at the floor plan, this is where the addition is, and this is where the 4 classrooms are. It's important to note that while we did not include 6 classrooms in this bond, and if you've been following the board meetings, we've talked about this at every board meeting since August or September. And there are many people in town who feel that we didn't go big enough. I don't know if any of you feel that way, but there are many people in town who feel that we didn't go big enough and that we should have done 6 classrooms. What we did is we sort of decided on 4, but we are thinking for the future. So the fact is that if 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, we find that we need more space, we're building this in a way that we don't need to adjust a lot of things. We're simply adding those 2 additional classrooms with no need to adjust any stairwells or move any exits. We could just add 2 more right here. So the current plan allows for additional classrooms as well. And look at this really beautiful multi-use space. It's able to function as an auditorium, a cafeteria, or any other purpose the school or the community at large may have. The fact is that it is really a community space as well as an opportunity to open up space within Hillside. I've heard some concerns about quality of the school food. The fact is, if you're a Hillside parent and you want to send your kid with your own lunch, feel free. There's no need that you have to utilize the cafeteria, but the cafeteria is, and there's an FAQ sheet here, less than 6% of the total bond, and it really gives us that flexibility to have 2 grades eat at one time and open up the ability to start this centralized learning hub. The other thing with the flexibility of 2 grades eating at one time is it gives you flexibility of scheduling. So, for example, there's the opportunity to allow kids to eat for a longer time potentially. There's the opportunity to have kids have more recess outside, have more outdoor time. These are all things that become possible potentially with this flexibility. So I wanted to talk about the 21st century learning commons that this will open up. As I mentioned, while it's not part of the bond, it's not possible without the bond. So to walk you through some of the ideas of what this could look like, what it could be, what it could mean for the learning environment of our children, I wanted to bring up Lauren to talk about that.
Jeremy. So these illustrations are just inspirational, but they're ideas of what the space could look like, and really the idea comes from the fact that this is in the center of the lower elementary wing, and what better use for that space to focus on learning and literacy as opposed to the current arrangement where the cafe is there, which actually detracts from learning for the youngest learners in the school, with all the traffic that goes through and the noise level that goes through on any given day. So when space is opened up at Hillside, by relocating the cafeteria space to the addition, a modern centralized learning commons or 21st century library at Hillside will be intentionally designed to make young children feel safe, curious, and open for learning. The library's relocation to the center of the lower elementary wing of the building, in the place of the current cafe, both emphasizes our district's core commitment to literacy and to self-directed learning. The American Association of School Librarians created a national standards framework for learners in 2017, based on 6 integrated frameworks to inquire, to include, to collaborate, to curate, to explore, and to engage. These 6 frameworks came from the association's national research that verifies that the school library is a unique and essential part of a learning community. It is a destination for on-site personalized learning, and the school library is a vital connection between the school and the home. These frameworks will be embodied in a new, enticing learning commons at Hillside, whose space and intention allows for inquiry, inclusion, collaboration, exploration, and engagement. The space could be zoned for different ages, more playful and physically varied for K through 2, and also for social group interaction better suited for grades 3 and 4. Quieter zones for individual readers could also be part of the design. The space zones could be designated by varied colors of floor or carpet tiles, by low partitioning to allow for natural light to flow through the space, and by the flexible clustering of furnishings. The space could provide easy access to the collection of library materials, a general collaborative space for group work or whole class visitation, and interactive areas for problem solving or tinkering with creative materials, as well as quiet spaces for reading or contemplation. Modular, movable, low shelving could be combined with flexible, varied seating, as well as interactive features like dens, tunnels, and cozy corners to create a vibrant and exciting place that children want to visit. The flexible arrangement of furnishing could allow the space to accommodate different types of learning activities, and its novelty would add to the students' engagement of the space. The Learning Commons could have interactive features that could include a whiteboard or Lego walls, either on end panels or modular bookshelves or low partitions, a storytelling area with puppets or miniatures, self-directed STEM stations with a variety of constructive or deconstructive materials, and digital listening devices or digital research resources. Powered tables and charging stations could be in place of fixed PCs so that teachers could include technology devices as part of instruction without cluttering the environment that is focused on books and primary reading material. The centralized learning commons at Hillside will be intended for children to talk about books, to share books, and to create, explore, and engage both independently and with others. The Learning Commons environment focuses on the young readers, putting books at their level, making materials accessible in a variety of different ways, and encourages children to respect others' reading and learning experiences by letting them see others engaged differently than themselves.
So that is the Hillside edition and the Hillside work that we're looking to do. As I mentioned, the bond is focused on all three schools. So, I think we've kind of talked about the space issues at Hillside, but we looked at the middle school and high school, and there were some pieces of work that were important to do as well. So it starts with, at the middle school, some of the kind of nuts and bolts items: roofing, masonry, cornices, repairing the clocks and the PA systems as well. And then we looked at the Farragut Middle School auditorium. I don't know if anyone has been in there. This auditorium has been underutilized. It's a very large space, really for the last 20 to 30 years. And so, we had the principal and assistant principal of middle school come in and talk to the board and really talk about how they wanted to reimagine that space and what they wanted to do with it. And they were really passionate about the fact that having an auditorium and a space, a gathering space, would be really great. So revitalizing that space and reengaging that community within its own auditorium is one project. And I'll show you some images of the current auditorium, and they're pretty pretty noticeable in terms of the damage there. And then the Farragut Middle School and Hastings High School Music Suite renovation. It's been in disrepair from its very high use area. We know, I don't know if anyone is at the board meeting on last Monday, but over 150 people came to talk about their passion for the music program, and we know that this is a program that's very important to Hastings, and so looking at renovating that space with new flooring, lighting, soundproofing, as well as improvements to instrument and material storage. So here are some pictures of the Farragut Middle School auditorium. This here is the roof where there was some water damage caused 15 or 20 years ago. Never fixed since then. Here's some paint cracking on the walls. This here is mold in the corner back on the stage area. These seats are mostly broken and don't work, and more paint cracking. If this was your house, frankly, you'd be embarrassed. It's an area that is completely underutilized, and with space issues at Hillside and tight space at middle school, the Hillside students moving up to the middle school, it's really important to get ahead of that now when we have the chance. So here is the stage, and here's the seating area with all seats on a raised floor so that everyone can see from their seats. In terms of the Hastings High School and Farragut Music Suite, sort of outdated, really kind of falling apart. Some more images of the flooring. The fact is that schools don't fix themselves, and this is only going to get more outdated. And so there's an opportunity right now to really enhance the middle school and the high school areas that are heavily used. So let's talk about the process and the timeline from here. Since last November till this September, the bond committee was working to develop scopes of work. In September, H2M, the architect firm, worked with us to hone in on that project scope of work. As Doug mentioned, we've had many meetings at public meetings, at the board meetings, taking this from 35 million to 18 million. In January, on January 7th, once we decided on the final ballot amount, we started the process to get approvals, necessary approvals from SECRA, and then we're in the process now of doing information sessions and getting all the information out in terms of information in the enterprise and other newsletters that will be going out to houses as well. So as I mentioned, the bond vote is on February 28th. After that, if the bond passes, there's a pretty long process to actually start construction. So one of the reasons that the bond vote is on February 28th, or really the main reason that we're doing it in February, is that it takes about a year to go through the process to get construction documents approved, submit documents to the SED, State Education Department, and if you miss the window, basically if you have a vote after early March or so, then you will miss potentially starting that construction in the summer of 2020. This is a little bit different than doing construction on your house. The fact is a lot of this construction can only be done in the summertime. There are some items here that can be done during the school year, but most of the construction needs to be done when students aren't in the building. And so that process takes about 9 to 12 months. The bidding and awarding of contracts starts in January. So if this goes on schedule, we start in January 2020 bidding that out. Why do we do it in January? Because the fact is that contractors want to fill up their schedules for the summer. In January and February, they're eager to get work, willing to give you a better deal. If you wait till March or April, they already have their schedules full, and they're not really willing to negotiate or give you as good a price. So bidding starts, and then around April, we can start doing some of the work that is not necessary for students to be out of the school, and then summer 2020, we can start the work, and that work will be done by should be done by the beginning of the 2021-22 school year, so fall of 2021. So why now? We've talked about, what the issues are. We have a space issue, and we're really looking to address space issues and make sure that the school, does not fall into disrepair, get ahead of this, ahead of time. One, interest rates are low. The fact is that interest rates are only going in one direction, and they're still historically very low. Two, we have 42.4% of this bond is eligible for state aid. Really important, even since the last community forum, the governor, and Maureen could talk a little bit more about this, the governor has recently proposed that around July 1st, they're considering lowering that state aid. So, we've talked about in the past that there's no guarantees that the state aid will always be available, or that it'll be available at this level. Who knows which direction that will go, but the fact is that there is talk right now about that state aid dropping as soon as July 1st, and this is the window. And also, as we talked about, it's been 20 years since we've done work on the interior of the buildings. The last bond was about the fields, very little work done on the interior of the building, and the last bond before that was in 2001. The fact is, a lot of districts get ahead of these things by doing bonds on a 5-year cycle. We got away from that. I think people got lulled into the notion that schools fix themselves and that you don't need to invest in the schools, and property taxes cover everything. The fact is, property taxes cover the operating budget. Capital projects need to be done in other ways, and so that's really at the end of the day, this is really the right time to invest in the schools for the future. So with that, happy to open it up to questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was a great, thorough presentation. Everything on here, at least from what I can gather and what you presented, seems very, very reasonable. In the past meetings, what have been some of the objections that have been raised?
I can answer because I probably raised a lot of them. the biggest concern is, are we adding enough classroom space? And I'll just clarify, without opining, we've said that we're adding 5 classrooms. We're actually adding 5 classrooms worth of square footage, but it's not a net gain of 5 classrooms. There's an issue that we have these small service rooms for ENL and for special education, and they're out of compliance. And to fix them, we need to enlarge one to pull in a window. So yada, yada, we're adding 4 classrooms on the one end, but we're losing some that already exist to remedy these 9 small rooms. So what we will get in terms of space, and this I think is the concern you hear a lot, is we get enough to meet the demands of today, meaning that right now, every grade has 6 sections. So if this were built today, we could house 6 sections in every grade, and every special would have a classroom, and we would be able to have our, we have what's called a communications room. It's a special ed larger classroom. We would be able to house all of our needs of today in terms of special ed, sections, and specials. Excuse me, but if enrollment grows, as we keep talking about, we've heard that the realtors say there's all these 3 children families coming in, and the preschools have wait lists they never had. If that enrollment grows, we will not be able to accommodate another section. If program changes, say for a science lab, we will not be able to accommodate. If special ed demands change, we will not be able to accommodate. So that, I think, is probably one of the big issues.
I agree. I think that was one of the thoughts that went through my mind as being presented. It's like, well, if we're building an addition, why not go bigger? But as it stands right now, it's a yes, no, all or none, right? It's not as if this isn't a tiered approach where we can choose. So at this stage, it's really, we just have to choose yes or no, right?
Yeah, and we thought about that a lot, and I think there was a lot of discussion around sort of a split vote. I think in the FAQ it talks about the fact that a lot of times when you do a split vote, there's this assumption that some parts are unnecessary. We really feel like this is an investment in the full district, and one of the issues with a split vote is that you can kind of have sort of cherry picking of well, I care about this school but I don't care about that school, or I just want to do the roofs, and the fact is that really all of this work is necessary. I mean, the reality is that there are space issues, and we have classes on carts. We have discussions around what happens if we don't do anything and the school gets more full. Do we need to move to trailers? There are realities that if you don't act, there are costs, and so looking at the different options, this is really about does the community want to invest in the schools, as they haven't really been asked to do that much over the last 20 years, and if so, are we going to do it across the district?
Hi, I'm Dorothy Nagel. I'm the parent of a 2nd grader at Hillside. I just wanted to thank everyone for their time and effort on this. Thanks for being here. I was curious about the existing library. How is that space going to get used when we have this new common area in the existing cafeteria, and also the small gym and the larger gym? How is the function or the space going to get used differently?
Was this on? So the existing library will be split into 2 classroom spaces. It'll be reallocated. The small gym and the larger gym are scheduled to remain in the same use they've been used. No. I mean, I think like in the beginning of the day, like, so if they were bringing kids in the morning, like if it's too cold or raining outside, that space could be used as well. Like I think, but I don't think for gym per se it would not be used. But it is a large open space that I guess could be used to do some type of activity in there, whether like dancing or something else, if they had a program in that.
And Amy Cases mentioned that having the larger addition, the all-purpose room, the new one, with the stage that was raised, would really give opportunity for more production. And for example, the fourth grade graduation or even the kindergarten graduation that occurs, parents aren't really able to see, and they sort of move it to the side and not use the stage, because even when children are on the stage, you can't see them on the stage. So the newly designed all-purpose room in the addition would be able to solve that issue, and the current use would be more of as a gymnasium.
One thing I also want to mention is that, we talked a lot about, what happens if we don't build this addition and we just repurpose some of the space, and the space that's currently the gym used to be a cafeteria. What if we put some, the old floor back? And the reality is that there's a cost to do that as well. And the difference between doing that and building an addition came out to something like 1.5 million or somewhere around that. And when you put the 42.4% state aid, it comes out to even less that you're borrowing. And so the feeling was, why try to sort of move this puzzle when, for really in the overall scope of things, the extra money that you're borrowing to build the addition versus putting new flooring back in and doing some of the kind of repurposing isn't that much of a savings. And so I've heard a lot of people saying, why don't we just repurpose, and why don't we do, repurposing is not as cost effective as as it would seem. So I just wanted to make sure that people recognize the fact that we had many discussions around that, and talked to H2M about the difference in pricing of 6 classrooms, only 4 classrooms, and repurposing the auditorium, not building the addition, the addition plus 4 classrooms, addition plus 6 classrooms. I mean, we looked at literally all the options, and this is really where we netted out. And one of the reasons is that, at some of the early forums, there were people that felt that we weren't going large enough, and we really have to kind of weigh the tax implications. The reality is that some people feel like $1 extra is too much, and some people feel like we're not going large enough. And so we tried to come up with a compromise that gives us the flexibility, but doesn't go thinks for the future, but doesn't go too large that it's sort of really hindering those people that feel like this is too large as it is.
Actually, let me just stay on that point just to get back to your original question, which is being very cognizant. As a group, we were very cognizant. As a group, we were very cognizant of the potential risk associated with not being big enough. But as trustees that have to be representative of the entire community, if we're at 6 classrooms and we realize in hindsight that we're at a cyclical peak, and we are at, as the slide indicated, we're at a 20-year high. There is a fixed housing stock. We're not building new houses. This isn't Ardsley where condos are going up. The condos that are, or I shouldn't say condos, any development that's being discussed for the waterfront is many, many years off. If we get to 6, because it seems like it might be needed, we have a tax obligation associated with that, and there's a significant portion of the community for whom this, $50-odd per $100,000 of assessed value is not trivial, right? So our solution is one of, we know, at least we think we know, that there's a space constraint in the existing hillside. The build time is not long. You're an April 20 start. You're a 21-22 academic year completion and open, right? So the gap of time is short. And ideally, if passed, we have a solution that meets our current needs. And if the population goes the other direction and reverts back to a mean, well, then we're in a great spot. We've got a little bit of additional flex. If we're wrong on that, we're going to need to deal with space issues, but they're the same issues we're dealing with as a district and as a group of trustees and as a group of administrators currently. So that's really, in a nutshell, it's the balancing act of trying to be sensitive to the tax obligations that come along with this, with an acknowledgement of real and tangible space constraints that exist in the building as it stands.
Yeah, I guess I could have a couple of questions, but okay, here's one. Well, first of all, I just want to say my kid is in the music program, and I'm glad you're doing something about the music areas because they do need help. And it's actually, if they were fixed up more, then I think people would take more pride in their instruments if they had good places to put them away, and we wouldn't be wasting also instruments that may be falling into disrepair because there's no good place to put them, and so it would have an effect of like saving money in the long run if the space was nicer. So I'm glad that that is in there. But I was wondering about the middle school auditorium, if you considered the fact that we haven't really used it in all those years, and all the middle school productions of various things have all happened in the high school, whether you considered using that space for something else, either something, you know, performing arts related or otherwise. Just curious about that.
Do you want to start with it and then we'll fill in? Yeah.
Sure. So yes, that space, the middle school auditorium, and I do agree with you. I think in terms of the music storage that you mentioned is big, and that plus the air conditioning we hope will like help, you know, with the keep our instruments in better shape. But in terms of the middle school auditorium, we had looked at many uses of that space, including converting it to even for areas of science and like makerspace type of spaces, moving our tech lab up there. And there were a lot of different, we talked about either even having like an open space for either dance or different type of programming. But what it really came back to, and I think Jeremy had mentioned it, the middle school does not have a space to gather for the entire middle school, for both assemblies, for just bringing grade level people to. There's a lot of reasons other than shows that having a space like that would benefit the middle school. So although we did the analysis and looked at different options for the space, the middle school administration, it seemed they kept coming back to that need, you know, was the largest need for them. And then also it does open up opportunities for more additional performances and things, because right now with the sharing of the high school auditorium, it doesn't allow for as many, I think there'll be more opportunities to have additional performances and arts brought into the middle school.
All right, thanks for that. That helps. So I guess I just want to ask, this is just based on talking to people and some things I've heard, and you can bat them away if you want, but I noticed that while some of this is for special ed, and you mentioned improving the classrooms at Hillside, and you know, one thing people are wondering is you guys really have a lot on your plate, hiring a new superintendent, a new director of curriculum, and so why do all this at the same time with the bond? Why does it have to be done this year? And I guess one thing that I heard, and I don't know if it's true, is that with all the new, especially with all the new special ed staff that's being hired, that I guess that maybe like you're afraid that we wouldn't be in compliance with the settlement of the special ed lawsuit unless we do something quickly to fix up all the space to make it better. I mean, is that really what's driving this being done now, or it's? I'm not saying that it's true. I'm just saying it's something that I've heard.
Yeah, that's about 6 issues, but they're good, and then they're interconnected, and I think there's some probably misinformation in there as well. So it'd probably be good to talk about some of them. Lisa, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Andy, the compliance issue is actually does not have to do with the audit of special education. It's that the rooms we have are either the state sets up codes on when you have these one-on-one, one-on-two rooms, you know. And again, I'm not going to know the code, but I'm just going to give possibilities. It might need a window, or it might need a minimum amount of space. So the spaces we have are out of compliance with the state regulations on how much square footage and how much and ventilation. So I think if we were not doing work on the building, we could probably let them lie, for better or worse. But I think once you start doing work, then you trigger your obligations. In the same way you may have a bathroom that's not handicap accessible, but once you start doing work, then you are mandated to bring it to code.
And that's actually just to really dig on that point. So, and Maureen, correct me if I'm misstated in any way, but these spaces are spaces that are required for our special education population. That's a standalone issue, has nothing to do with this addition or any of the work that we're doing. Were this, go through a scenario where it's not passed, or were it to be not raised, there is a waiver. This is an existing building. The building, you know, was built long ago, and this is a level of service that we need to deliver to students. So we are, you know, out of compliance technically, but the state recognizes our space constraint, and we have waivers to operate, and we, you know, do everything we can to maximize the amount of space.
Yeah.
Speaking from my perspective, it's categorically not a reason to ask the community to fund a long-term capital investment. We have disrepair across roofs. We have 50-year-old windows, 60-year-old windows. We have flooring that's VAT asbestos flooring. Like, there are fundamental, you know, renovation work that needs to be done. And if you look at the bonds that are being done, whether that's in Irvington or whether that's in Mamaroneck, we're all looking at the same issues, safety issues with the PA system. That needs to happen.
In turn,
it needs to happen. And then when you're going through a process and saying, we're undertaking necessary renovation work, what are the other issues sort of in the long-term planning for your facilities? When you have out-of-compliance spaces, they're an obvious point, but they're not, in a nutshell, as the concept that it's a driving factor and sort of the subtext of fear of the special education brushback or blowback, that's not it. Right? Like,
I just want to also say
in terms of timing, real quick too, just to mention, you know, we started these discussions in January, February last year, and the bond vote was actually supposed to be in the fall. It actually got pushed back when we had a superintendent change. And so this was actually from the 2015 survey, and this is just something that is supposed to be happening on a every 5-year basis. So it's been 5 years since the last bond. This was not, hey, it's the fall, let's figure out something that we need to do right away because we want to put more on our plate. This was actually pushed back. So if it were to be pushed back more, then we're actually pushing it back a year and a half from where the vote was supposed to be.
I just also want to clarify, as far this is not a special education issue. This is a space issue, and the special, just like there are more additional. I think the chart showed earlier, we are experiencing an overall enrollment increase at Hillside. You have a few extra sections of K through 4. You have some additional special education spaces. You have programming. A few years ago, we knew we had a space issue a few years ago when the instrumental music program lost their dedicated space. So this has been a buildup of having some additional class sizes that were coming in that were larger than expected. So I want to be clear that this is not being driven solely on special education. It is one piece of the equation, and any of the staff that's being proposed for next year are ICT teachers, which go into existing K-4 classrooms. So they are not driving, the addition of that staff is not causing anything, this has nothing, it's not related to this bond. So I think just to be, clear that it's a combination of all of our programming, some of which include special education. We did find out there is no waiver, but because like Lisa had mentioned, when you start to do work at a building, then you have a requirement to bring it up to code. So that's part of why we're now looking at different spaces, including even RTI spaces, which are not necessarily special education spaces, that we now have come to find out are not in compliance with the space. So this bond actually fixes a bunch of space compliance issues, but it did start, to be honest with you, with the need initially we were like, oh, we don't have instrumental music space. Oh, we don't have a space for FLAS. Like, that's really, we started just to get tight and not be able to house all of the things we have. We have STEAM now that had never existed. So as you grow programs, there's a need for space. So I just don't want it to be, known as this is the special education.
Well, can I just
The other piece
ask?
where special ed does come in, I think it helps explain to somebody of my generation why there is a squeeze on space. There are classrooms that were classrooms, say, 10 years ago, but now they've been divvied up into these smaller one-on-one and one-on-two. Like I said, we have 9 of those rooms, whereas we didn't used to have that. And, you basically...
Required.
Yeah, whatever, I'm not saying right or wrong, it's just...
Required services.
Yes. So
But a lot of them are
anyway, so
building
you
level.
have
That's why I just want, the speech are actually building, a lot of them, right? It's for
But anyway,
both.
so just to let you know, in the existing structure, there's 3 to 4 former classrooms that are now these divided spaces. So if somebody of my generation, those were classrooms, so that helps to explain why there's more of a squeeze than we had, than those of us who are a little older remembered.
Okay, well, if I could just,
Enrollment, of course.
if I could just, so are we having an overall staff increase in the schools? Is that part of this? You said there's an overall student increase, but is there an overall staff increase, and you've got to put all those staff members somewhere? Is that part of what's going on?
Well, we have been increasing our staff as needed. If there's an enrollment increase at a grade level, we do hire a teacher. But in terms of next year, that's to do with just existing students or students incoming and the need for special education teachers. But it is tied to this bond, but it's not. Like, the budget is separate from the bond conversation, because this space issue is pre-existing our next year budget.
All right.
We would have it regardless. If we were not hiring those ICT teachers, they're just gen ed classrooms with an extra teacher in them. They're not a new classroom opening up, except for there is an additional communications class that is opening up next year. So that is one additional classroom that was needed.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you, because you have so much on your plate. You're a very hardworking group of people up there, and I know there's been a lot of late nights involved with this, so thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Megan Spana. My son is in 2nd grade. And I just wanted to let everybody know that there's a group of people, mostly parents, that are organizing to get together and get the word out to everybody in town to advocate for people to vote yes on this bond. Tonight at 8 o'clock, there's a meeting at 5 Magnolia Drive. That is technically Dobbs, but it's just right over the border. So if anybody can make it, your attendance would be much appreciated. And if you're interested but can't make to the meeting, let me know, and I can give you Ido Nevo's contact information, and you can contact him directly. He's really driving the whole thing. So thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Going once, going twice. Obviously, you can always, if a question comes to mind, some of you may have had an opportunity to review the materials before you came here, maybe not. Hot off the presses, and they're in the back, right, Janine? Are an 8-page document that goes through everything from just the high level to some of the questions. So we've tried to compile questions as they've come in over the last 3 months and answer them here for everyone. Some of the kind of the hottest questions and most frequent questions that we're getting, as well as some of these pictures are in there as well. Again, illustrative pictures. It will look different. I think that's something I've heard that's not in here, but I think is really important to know, is that we are not at the design phase yet. That happens after we have to do a kind of a shell of what that looks like so that we can get the bond down and generally understand square footage and where things are going to go. But what it will actually look like and the specifics, that will be after the bond passes. So pictures in there are illustrative. There's some, the Q&As in there. Most important, you have something to say,
No, go
Jerry?
ahead. I do.
Okay.
I was just going to say, Doug, let's not forget the TV show.
Oh, yeah. That is, do we have specifics on when that is getting,
Patrick, do you have the green light? There you go.
before and after this presentation? So you missed the before, but the after is on, what's it? It's on WHOH. Okay. So that is several board members, actually I think just me, and Charlie and Maureen and Joe talking about some of these projects in more detail. Some of
I think
you.
you want a tour.
And, oh, yeah, and the tour. I was not there for the tour, so yes, and for the tour.
Doug, is it a show with a name?
Patrick, did you name it something?
4-hour public bond?
Yeah, it'll just probably loop.
It's going to be on the loop,
It'll be
yeah.
on the loop, and you'll get
Yeah.
a detailed walkthrough.
Doug, I just do want to say something when people pick this up and read it, and I think we'll have to correct it if we print more, that there's a question about the middle school auditorium and why it's being repurposed. And it actually, the information reflects what we were originally doing with it, with flexible spaces and a STEAM classroom. And it doesn't reflect the renovation to the classroom, to the auditorium as we've come back to. So we can correct it, but I just want to say if people are looking through it on this one, it's what we presented tonight, that it's a renovation of the auditorium.
As an auditorium. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll have to get that corrected. Yeah, so most important thing is come out and vote and talk to people, share some thoughts and ideas with others. I think that what's obviously hard, you're paying attention to things in your own life, obviously. You probably have children, that's why you're here. You're paying attention to your job. You're paying attention to things at the town level. And the detail with which we've had to go through and make some of these decisions is something that took us 14 meetings and many hours outside those meetings to wrestle with, and to quickly read a quick email on a train and then overhear someone. The likelihood that you're getting the whole story is probably low. It's just one of the challenges with trying to pass a complex bond. So I'd recommend, chat with people, read as much material as you can. It's all on our website. If you have questions, certainly email to the board. We've been pretty good about answering all of those. We can get behind by about a week or so with the amount, but we do answer all of those. Reach out to the administration if you have any questions. We have noticed that there is some misinformation. People come up and say, hey, this is going, I'm like, no, where'd you hear that? Well, I heard that over here in the train. Well, no, actually here, read this document. You'll get the full story. So that's it, February 28th, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the Cochran Gym. Thank you very much for your time.